The following episode contains disturbing material that might be inappropriate for some viewers. Viewer discretion is advised.
As humans, we all have passions and goals, things we want to achieve in life. Whether it's buying that car you've always wanted, travelling to that amazing place in the world, or trying to reach the top of your game. Whatever the goal is, it's something that drives you, and that's healthy, right? Now imagine if your passion was something really dark, something so gruesome you had to keep it locked away inside your mind, stopping it from becoming true. For Issei Sagawa, that goal, that thing he wanted to do was dark, and I struggled to believe his story when I read it. The thing he wanted more than anything else was to eat someone. Before I reveal just how disturbing this twisted tale gets, if this sounds like something you'd enjoy, then bite down on that subscribe button, because we try to release stories just like this at least once a week. In the bizarre and twisted mind of Issei Sagawa, the first to dine on real human flesh was so absorbing it invaded his mind every moment of every day, until eventually he couldn't hold it back anymore, and he acted on his desires. On the 11th of June 1981, the Japanese student acted on his perverse fantasy and invited a friend round for dinner. Issei Sagawa was born prematurely on the 26th of April 1949 in Kobe, Japan. It was reported that he was so small he could fit in the palm of his father's hand, but his parents adored him, raising him in natural surroundings, caring for him and educating him. His early years were carefree, probably the best time of his life, but there was a dark side to him, one that got bigger as he grew. While at school in the first grade, he found himself fascinated by the thigh of a classmate, the shape, the colour, the way it moved when they'd tapped their toe in lesson. It infatuated him. He would think about it day in and day out, trying to understand why he felt the way he did, and his weird obsession soon led him to having cannibalistic desires towards girls' thighs and short skirts, and he began to imagine the taste of their flesh, the texture as he bit into them, and how it would feel to have their skin in his mouth. And in a desperate way to try and control his urges, he turned his attention towards a family dog, doing things to the poor animal I cannot bring myself to ever talk about. And remember, at this point, he was just a small boy. As he grew, so did his darker and more horrific fantasies. Growing into adulthood, Sagawa, now aged 24, attended Wako University in Tokyo. He found himself drawn to Western women because, and I quote, "I was weak and short, and Western women are tall and beautiful." Now, unable to control his urges, came the opportunity to fulfill his dream when he followed a tall, beautiful German lady home who was living close by. Waiting until it was dark, he broke into the ground floor apartment of the sleeping woman. She was naked, and for a moment he stood there, enjoying looking at her body. As he watched her gently breathing, he hatched a plan to knock her out, then get a knife from her kitchen. He decided he was going to push it deeply into the cheek of her behind and cut away some of her flesh. Hesitantly, he crept past her, but accidentally knocked her hanging arm, waking her up. Spotting this stranger in her room, the woman screamed out in terror and her fight or flight instinct kicked in. She managed to push Sagawa to the ground before fleeing to get some help. Sagawa was later caught by the police and charged with attempted rape, but little did they know what his true intentions were. After his father paid a settlement to the victim, all of the charges were dropped, and Sagawa was free to roam the streets looking for another victim. In 1977, aged 28, Sagawa moved to France to study literature. While living in Paris, his obsession with cannibalism had now become an obligation and said, and I quote, Almost every night, I would bring a prostitute home, and then I would try to shoot them. But for some reason, my fingers froze up, and I couldn't pull the trigger. But it wouldn't be long before he did. Renée Hartevelt was a 25-year-old Dutch woman and a classmate of Sagawa. Now, with an extreme need to eat human flesh, she was selected because of her health and beauty. Sagawa believed he was small, ugly and weak, and thought by eating her, he would in some sick way absorb all of her characteristics. On a pretext of translating poetry for a school assignment, Renée was invited over to his apartment for dinner on the 11th of June, 1981. After entering the room, smelling the authentic Japanese cuisine that had been prepared, and discussing the assignment, she sat down at the desk and began reading the poetry aloud. With the desk and chair facing the wall, unbeknown to Renée, Sagawa slowly crept over to the wardrobe behind her and pulled out a rifle. While Renée continued to read the poems with no idea of what was about to happen, Sagawa approached. With a smile on his face, he carefully pointed the barrel directly at her head. And with one quick pull of the trigger, she was dead. Renée collapsed forward onto the desk before falling to the ground. Blood started to pour from her head, so he carefully placed a towel under her. With his goal finally achieved, Sagawa could now indulge in all of the sick fantasies, including having sex with her lifeless body. With everything planned out in his head, and which part he was going to start feasting on, he undressed her. And I can't believe I'm saying this, but he believed that her right bottom cheek would be the most delicious part. But after attempting it, he realised it was too hard to bite into. So grabbing a fruit knife from the kitchen, he tried to cut some away. But again, it didn't go through the skin. So he gave up and bought a meat knife from the local market. And this time, it worked. Over the next 2 days, he started to dismember Renée's body, consuming various parts cooked and raw. And as if his twisted tale couldn't get any more gruesome, he also took photos of her body every time he ate part of it. He even saved parts he thought were best, like her thigh, and stored them in the fridge. With the murder done and the fantasies enjoyed, the only thing left was, what do you do with the remains? It was summer in Paris. It was hot. Sagawa was worried that the corpse was going to start to smell, so he had to get rid of it, or at least what was left. Getting hold of 2 travelling cases, he placed the remains inside, struggling to get the whole torso in as it was too heavy for the weak man to lift. He had decided to sink the cases in a local lake with the aid of a taxi driver to get him there. Picking up the extremely heavy cases, the driver was quoted to have asked jokingly if there was a body inside, but was told it was just books. Arriving at the lake at 8 p.m, Sagawa had not realised just how bright it would be at that time of year, so there were still so many people around still. Undeterred, even with the questioning views of others, he began to drag the heavy cases towards somewhere quiet. Finding a secluded spot that was sloped towards the lake, he started pushing them. He was weak, drained of all his energy, so he left the cases and took a moment to rest, gazing at the beautiful setting sun. When, only a moment later, there was a scream. Turning around, he saw a man opening one of the cases, who asked him if they were his. Impulsively, he said no, so the man opened it to find a bedsheet covered in blood. "Murderer!" shouted the man to a woman high up on the slope, and as people gathered around, Sagawa quietly slipped away. 4 days later, Sagawa was arrested after being examined by French psychiatrists. It was concluded that he was mentally insane and sent to a criminal psychiatric hospital. But before they could start any treatment, there was a public uproar over the expense of keeping him in hospital in France, so he was eventually deported. After arriving in Japan, he was immediately committed to a mental hospital, where psychologists declared that he was sane and it was a sexual perversion that motivated him to murder. And in the most unbelievable twist in this tale, all of the charges against him in France were dropped, and all of the court documents were not passed to Japanese authorities. Sagawa could not be detained in Japan, so this murderer, this cannibal, walked free. With no job or any income, Sagawa struggled to live until one day he received a call from the media. After paying him greatly for an exclusive interview, opportunities for work started to follow, including writing books, starring in comics, and even being in a film that reenacted the story of Little Red Riding Hood, where he played the wolf. This evil, small, ugly man got away with murdering and eating a beautiful young woman, and in 1986, he became a celebrity. What is wrong with this world? Thankfully though, by the end of the 1990s, he was cast aside by his own society and nobody wanted to publish his books. The media were no longer interested in him and he struggled to find employment. His parents died in 2005 and he was prevented from attending their funeral. And in a final pleasing result, in 2013 he was hospitalised because of a brain condition that permanently damaged his nervous system. Now, in his early 70s, Sagawa is reportedly living somewhere outside Tokyo. He suffers from a deadly heart disease, he is wheelchair bound and is fed through a tube in his stomach. What Sagawa did is truly evil, and I'm sickened by the thought that he not only got away with it, but for a while he was rewarded for it. However, karma is a thing, and now he has to live out the rest of his days in pain, alone, and I hope haunted by his evil actions. Hey everyone, thanks for watching our twisted tale, The Kobe Cannibal. If you enjoyed it, then please bite that like button and consider sharing it. And if you really liked what we do, then please subscribe. It will really help us out. Good night and keep safe.